Ole Miss fans, welcome to the live stream. It's Zach Moreth here with Daylan Flowers with another episode of the Rebel Talk. Really just a tough loss today. I don't really have a lot of words here, Daylan. That was just about as frustrating as you can imagine. Florida wins 24-17 and almost had several chances to win this game, and, they couldn't capitalize. That's the season, man. As crazy as it sounds, it's over just like that. So I just want to get your initial thoughts. I'm struggling here to come up with words for this one.
Yeah, believe it or not, and I also I'm gonna try to wait a little bit till we get some people to twinkle in as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not as frustrated as I thought I was going to be the way the game had went on. Obviously it sucks. Like my heart kind of just sunk in, and it kind of is just really irritating because the way we lost this game today is honestly the same exact way that we lost our other two games this year.
Yeah.
And you get to this point of the season coming off the bye week, coming off the Georgia win, the Arkansas win, and the Oklahoma win, and you look at it and you think we gotten past this point.
Yeah.
And here we are again, and we haven't. And one big thing that we kind of talked about this whole week is just that away game situation. And I thought that we were going to do so well with this not being a night game in Gainesville, and Gainesville is a tough environment regardless of the situation. But I thought that was going to help us out so much more. But we come out of Gainesville with a loss. And it stings. Like in one point that I also want to bring up, there's a huge point that I want to have a conversation with you. I'm just not going to do it yet, but
Yeah.
it stings because Jackson Dart is, unfortunately, this is the part of sports that sucks. But everything that he's done now, unfortunately, in my personal opinion, now has a tainted part on it. Like his legacy is now tainted, and it sucks because this kid has worked tirelessly for 3 years now to change the landscape of this program. And when I say that as well, let me make a point. And you can add on to this if you want or not. You can even disagree with me if you want. Although this season has not gone the way we wanted it to, and although I don't even think it's more than likely we're not going to go to the playoffs now,
No.
I still think what Jackson Dart has done with his time here is something that I have to be appreciative of. Now, although we did not live up to the expectations this year, and even his first year, I think that coming off the 11 wins, the 10 win season the year before, and just the expectations of a transfer quarterback, that it was a really good high school recruit. I think that although we didn't live up to those expectations, think of it in this perspective. We are now in a point where I think we can recruit with any team in the country. And although we may not be substantially able to do that with the high school portal, I think we've utilized the transfer portal really well. And I think Dart has now put us in the perspective that we can contend nationally, recruiting wise, with any team in the country. And although he may have not gotten the job done, he has now put us in a position that this is a place that can now be looked at in terms of how we can recruit properly moving forward. And I think Jackson has done a good job at that. Like I know that this game does not end the way we want it to, with him literally throwing ample interceptions and getting opportunity after opportunities to make up for them, and then him throwing another interception, then the interception getting dropped, and then him throwing another one. But I think he has done something that maybe no one else could be able to do. And so just kind of branch on that real quick. I want to hear what your thoughts are on
Yeah.
that.
And, you make a good point, Dalen. I think Dart did some incredible things. I got nothing but respect for the guy. But at the end of the day, Ole Miss was able to recruit at a high level before this season even happened. And you saw that with the acquisition of guys like Walter Nolan and Prince Iman Mielen, and, all these guys returning at the same time from the team last year. And you weren't able to put it together. And, this starts when you play Kentucky, because realistically, Dalen, if Florida's your second loss on the road after they just beat LSU, I think you're still competing for a playoff
Yes.
spot against Mississippi State next week.
Yeah.
You said it earlier, but just the fashion in which they lose these games, it's almost like ridiculous. I mean, you go back to that Georgia game, and Caden Davis scores 15 points for Ole Miss.
Mhm.
Today he misses. I think it was a 34-yarder. Then Ole Miss goes for it on fourth down with Big East and doesn't get any points. They get stopped there. Don't get the field goal or anything. And then you can't score in the red zone. It's just everything that went wrong today, and we saw that. The thing that bothers me is, Lane Kiffin going to the podium on Monday and telling the fans, we are peaking right now. Our health is great. They look great in practice. So we're all getting, this false idea, including myself, that, oh my, Ole Miss is locked in right now. They're going to go into Gainesville and win by 20, cut 20, 14, however many scores here. And we're going to be locked, maybe looking to host a playoff game. And that's just not the case. So really, just frustrating. I'm sitting here with my family watching at home and just bitter, man. I'm struggling to get words out about the defense. Maybe, one of the poorest performances of the year. I thought DJ Lagway made some crazy plays. There's no question he's going to be a stud, future first round NFL draft pick for sure. But I thought the run game, Florida was kind of running it at will. And that's something we haven't seen at all this year, Daylan. It's something that, the offense, I think, has relied on the Ole Miss defense for. Like, the defense is going to go out there and really, get the momentum back. And at the end of the game, the defense did that. There's no doubt. But Florida was moving the ball downfield. Their kicker made another ridiculous 53-yarder. The guy's been doing it all year. And then you look at what Ole Miss did in the red zone, and they couldn't score touchdowns. They couldn't make field goals, and they didn't kick field goals. So when that happens on the road in an environment that's known to be crazy, a team coming off of a win against a ranked LSU team, you're probably not going to win the game. Again, Jackson Dart, shout out. There's nothing but respect for the guy. He really did build this team. It's just disappointing when you put all, your chips in a basket and you're telling your fans we're going to make the playoffs and the goal is a national championship, and you're sitting here at the end of November picking up your third loss against a Florida team who's 4-4 in conference play. Doesn't sit well, Daylan.
I think the perplexity of this game was really weird. You're talking about how well Florida ran the ball in the first half. And I got to that point going into halftime. I was like, maybe this is going to be one of the typical Lane Kiffin games that we're used to in prior years, the shootout games that, our defense just kind of has one of those struggling days. And we had to just go out there and continue to flow offensively really well. It sucks because I made a tweet after Trey Harris goes down again. And
Yeah.
I don't want him to come back, and that was me saying, if he had the opportunity to come back, I don't want him to come back because I've seen this team in the weeks prior move and work without him really well, and I thought we were going to be able to do that again, and we just weren't. And I say that in the big play situations. I think this guy, when we use the talent around Trey Harris, I think when we do that collectively, then when he's getting those opportunities to have one-on-one coverage, and there's nobody can stop him. And we saw that on the deep route. I mean,
Yeah.
he gets past the cornerback, and even though there's a safety helping, Trey Harris has one-on-one touchdown, and that gets us 7 points. I think that something that is really big because I don't really want us to go over this is the running back situation, and I know that we've continued to talk about it all season long. And I hate that we're still talking about it with one regular season game left, but we have to. And it starts with the coaching staff. I don't want to criticize the players too much because I think they came in and they played their butts off. But I have to talk about Kevin Smith. Now, we're going to go in speculation because myself, you, everyone in the media, we don't know the exact situation of what's going on. We're going to continue to speculate that it's a Kevin Smith deal, and there's been tension between Kevin Smith and Ulysses Bentley. That the Ulysses Bentley, his attitude has changed, or there's a collection of things. Even the beginning part of the season when he wasn't playing, we were talking about maybe he's injured, and that's why he's seen limited reps, and maybe he will get limited reps because he will get more reps because we're going into the deeper part of the season, and that's when we were saving him for. But now we go at this Florida game and we don't see that, and it's just frustrating, man. We saw the correlation of what he can be. Comes out there in the LSU game on the second drive of him touching the ball, he gets a touchdown. from a 45-yard touchdown, and it's like, why are we not consistently seeing him put out there in the rest of the LSU game and the rest of the season? And we go back and forth, and it's just frustrating because we put everything into this season. We put all the NIL into this season. We put all the thought and preparation into this season, and to continue to see Ulysses Bentley not given any opportunity is frustrating. And don't get me wrong, I thought Micah Davis came into a role that we really hadn't seen him do much of this entire season and played as well as he possibly could. But the fact that we continue to see Dominic Thomas come out there and even Matt Jones come back out there for the first time in weeks, and we don't see Ulysses Bentley, but he's out there on kickoff returns, it just blows my mind, Zach. Like, it does. And that may have been a situation where that doesn't even change the game and the way the game ends result wise. But for me to sit there and say that Ulysses Bentley wasn't even given a chance, it just it frustrates me. It really does.
I don't look, and you can go back to the Georgia game. Bentley played and he scored a touchdown, and he was a crucial part in that receiving game and opening up the middle of the field. And for some reason, Micah Davis,
Yeah,
I think Micah Davis is, he's a fine receiver. He's not
yeah,
great. He's not bad. He's surely not a running back.
yeah.
I, I, dude, I can barely talk about it right now. I don't know how Ulysses Bentley doesn't see any snaps in this game. What It makes no sense, man. And then you can go look further in the offense here. And I was mentioning the red zone offense earlier, but
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I'm not a Division I football player, but it looked to me as if Juice Wells could have caught that pass with two hands on the back shoulder grab that probably should have been a
Yeah.
touchdown. And then Jordan Watkins, he's been awesome all year. Like, don't get me wrong, Jordan's been great, but sun's in his eyes, but he drops a perfect ball from Jackson Dart in the end zone.
Yeah.
So you can look at Dart and say that, yeah, why are you throwing into triple coverage? And then why are you throwing back-to-back interceptions to double down that the game is over?
Mhm.
But you can also, acknowledge the fact that Juice Wells and Jordan Watkins dropped wide open touchdowns. And at the same time, I really want to talk about the JJ Pegues thing.
Yeah. Let's
They
get into it.
overused it. They
Yeah.
overused it, Daylan. And for the first time all year, we saw a team that said, "No, we're going to stop this." And instead of trying to adjust, which they did on the Jordan Watkins fourth down conversion, you didn't change, and you sent Piggies out there again, and again, and it cost you the game. It cost you field goal points. It cost you better scoring position to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers near the end zone, and it just didn't work.
Let me add a point real quick to you, man.
Please,
I
please.
don't about the JJ thing. And there's literally so much we can talk about, and we're gonna. And as well, you guys in the comments, you can ask us questions. We're gonna answer your questions as
Yeah,
well.
please.
We appreciate you guys being here. But I don't think Florida stopped JJ. I thought we stopped ourselves with JJ. And when
Great
I
point.
say that, and Greg McElroy, as much as that I've gotten tired of Greg McElroy calling our games this year, he made a lot of great points throughout the game on commentary that we watched JJ go outside a lot, especially on that first fourth down in the first quarter. And we have our quarterback, Jackson Dart, as a lead blocker for JJ when he goes outside. When we can just go up the middle, there was a gap open and there was a linebacker there that if JJ just goes downhill, we get the first down.
Yeah,
And that's the point where everyone's criticizing Kiffin, just take the points, just take the points. And I wasn't mad at the play call. I wasn't at all. I thought that we had run the ball the play before and we had got it on the fourth and short so we could bring JJ in. But why is JJ running on the outside now? And let me stop and say this: that may be a JJ decision in that moment to see that Florida had brought in their big defensive lineman. I can't think his name, but he's a huge guy and he
yeah.
doesn't want to run up the middle. Or is that the coaches on the sideline when before JJ's going out telling him, "Hey, don't run up the middle because they brought in their big guy and let's try it on the outside." I don't get why we were running it on the outside. We didn't do that once. I believe we did that maybe 2 or 3 times when JJ came into the game and we ran with him. If we just run it up the middle, up the A gap, that's a first down. Ole Miss, and the offense is continuing to drive. That's momentum stopping for us, but that's as well on a road, giving a team that has high momentum coming off a big past weekend win against LSU. And having high expectations now, that's a momentum killer for us. But as well, one huge point that I want to make in that moment as well we see you talk about Caden Davis, and as much as I love the kid, he does have to knock down those 3 points, but we also kid ourselves. Micah Davis drops a punt return, and, that could be the sun, that could be he was just looking downfield, or he saw got scared of the defenders. We don't know, but that also, that the defense comes in, stops him, but they put a 3 points on that drive because Micah Davis drops a punt. That's a momentum killer, and I fail to tell people how much they don't realize that how much momentum is big in any sport, especially in football when you're on the road against a team like Florida and Gainesville that is coming off a great weekend and a good win against LSU, and how much they know and how much Billy Napier knows a win like this can change the totality of his program and his success being the head coach of Florida. We beat ourselves up many times. And like you said, I don't want to put too much blame on Juice Wells, but I was frustrated that Dart throws a perfect ball, you get the separation from the defender, you get that time, and you try to one hand catch it. I don't get it. I don't get it. You don't need to be Clark Kent. You don't need to be Superman. We need you to just be a wide receiver. Put your 2 hands up, catch it, go down, touchdown, Ole Miss. So that's something that's big. And Miss Mallory in the comments just brought up a huge point. Does Charlie Wise Jr. keep his job? This is a conversation that I've had with myself for a few weeks, but I haven't really talked about it, and I really want to talk to you about it, Zach. So obviously, we've all been critical of Charlie Wise this season, and I have a good friend named Dale Kennedy who years ago brought up to me that he didn't believe that Charlie Wise was built for the SEC. And I want to ask you this, man. Moving forward, do we keep Charlie Wise? That's my first question to you. But here's a thought that I also want you to have before answering that question. This is going to be Austin Simmons' program for the next year or two, maybe 3. He has now been here last year and this year under Charlie Wise. Now, as much as I'm critical of what Charlie Wise has done this year and the absolute absurd way he's called some of these situations in these games that we've lost and even won. Let me add that he's had some really head shaking play calls in even the games that we won. But do you think it's smart to get rid of Charlie knowing that Austin Simmons has been here under his system, has a great relationship with Charlie, knows how Charlie wants to run a game? Because we've seen the potential of what Austin Simmons can do this year. We've watched him in practice. We've read about him. We've read about the uniqueness he has. And I think there's going to be a few more tweaks in his game that can make him even better. But do you get rid of Charlie Wise, maybe scratching out how good Austin Simmons can be under what we now know him to be?
Yeah, and it's kind of an answer that you're not going to get. You're not going to get a good answer to this question, because not
Yeah.
only are you questioning, Austin Simmons' ability, but does Austin Simmons stay if the offensive
Yeah.
coordinator who recruited him leaves, right? Especially in the world of NIL, this is this is like, if your offensive coordinator leaves, and schools are going to come after you, and they're going to come after you really hard with big money packages. So you
Yeah.
have to consider that. But you look at the losses every single game this year, and in my opinion, it's on the offense.
Mhm.
I thought the defense did everything they needed, including today's game, which I thought they were
Yeah.
shaky in. They got the offense the ball back
Yep.
twice under 5 minutes, and the offense was unable to convert. So, do you recognize that Charlie Weiss and the play calling, sure, it was really good against Georgia, it was good against Arkansas. Yeah, we can recognize that. But, we got to acknowledge that these losses were really because the offense couldn't do anything in crunch time.
Yeah.
And it's a problem. You look at LSU. I know it's a hard place to play. I get it. LSU, turns out they're not that great, Daylan.
Yeah.
And you need to win that game. And you had several chances to, and the offense was horrendous. And then you look at Kentucky, horrible offensive performance. It felt like we were watching a similar offense from today to Kentucky. Today, again, they really couldn't do much. We talked about Pegues earlier. I did think he could have attacked, the middle of the holes a little bit better, because I think he can run over quite a few guys. But still, this is, in terms of Austin Simmons, I think this is a conversation that Lane Kiffin needs to have with Austin. You got to sit down with him and say, hey, you're here. A big part of that was because Charlie Weiss recruited you. How do you feel about the situation? Are you going to enter the portal? Are you going to go join another team if Charlie Weiss leaves? And at the same time, Lane Kiffin is very loyal to Charlie Weiss Jr. This is a guy who Lane coached with at FAU.
Yep.
Charlie's received criticism ever since he got here. You can go back, look at Alabama 2022.
Yep.
That's a game in the second half where the offense essentially puts up a blank.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, a lot of it started there. And it's continued, into 2023 and obviously into the losses of this year. And Kiffin hasn't gotten rid of them. So there's a lot of good questions to be answered there, Daylan. I want to get your thoughts about it, but it does concern me that if Weiss leaves, you definitely need to put up the question, would Simmons leave as well,
I don't know, and that's just like the part of what we do. We don't know these things because we're not Austin Simmons. I
Yeah.
just knowing Austin and talking with him a lot recently. I think that although he has a really good relationship with Charlie, I think he also has a really good relationship with Lane Kiffin. But you bring up a really good point that Charlie Weiss has been with Lane Kiffin way before Ole Miss, and that is why he was brought here after Jeff Levy went to OU, and that's why he got here. And some people will say, does Lane have the guts to actually make that call? And that's huge. And I don't know because you can see it as Lane saying, if I didn't do it this year, why am I going to do it? For next year, or am I going to do it for the remaining future? But that also ties into, does he have the same guts to do the same thing with Kevin Smith?
Yeah.
I think Kevin Smith has really developed himself to be a great recruiter. Do not get me wrong in that position, but I hate keep continuing to bring this up, like I said, but like I question what is truly going on behind closed doors in terms of how this situation has been handled. And even the offensive game plan in general this season, we lose Quinshon Judkins in the offseason, which, at the time I'm okay with. Obviously I don't want to lose a talent like that, but I thought that the portal and the way we handled it and the talent we brought in for the running back room at that time completely revamp the loss of Quinshon Judkins. But the game plan we've seen since losing him this season is the same game plan we had when we had him. And you can't continue to run the same game
No.
plan offensively like you have Quinshon Judkins when you don't. And that's the frustrating part. I've watched this run game struggle so much, but you look at it in the past 2 years, this offense is putting so much points, but that's because they had an effective run game. We don't have an effective run game this year. And although our pass game is look really fluid. And even the first half against Florida, the run game looked really, really fluid,
Yeah.
but we don't have a run game. And I fail to understand, if we won this game, how are we going to move forward in the playoffs without a consistent run game?
Yeah.
Because that's going to work against Florida. That's going to work again. That's going to work against Mississippi State. That's going to work against Arkansas. But when you're playing Ohio State, when you're playing Alabama, when you're playing Oregon, when you're playing Notre Dame, whoever it is, that's not going to work. And I'm sorry, it's just not. We watched Carson back in the Georgia offense pass the ball, try to pass the ball 35 times against us. And when you have an interior defensive line like us and like some other teams in the country similarly do have, it's not going to work. And that's the frustrating part because we've watched this offense be so high potent over the past couple of years, but that's because they rely so heavily on an effective run game. Now we don't have that, and we're relying so much on the pass game. It's frustrating what we really want to do. And as much as I want to sit here and say that this Lane Kiffin offense has been great, it has been, and it has been since he's been an offensive coordinator at Alabama, his time at FAU, and now, but he's had an effective run game. You think that Derrick Henry didn't come in and change the totality of what Lane Kiffin did at Alabama? You'd be dead wrong. You think Quinshon Judkins didn't change the totality of what Lane Kiffin really wanted to do well? You'd be dead wrong. Even before Quinshon Judkins, when Elijah Moore was in the backfield, that gave Matt Corral options. We
Yes.
don't have that option right now. And that is the continued frustrating part about not seeing Ulysses Bentley at all. We saw Micah Davis today. We've seen Matt Jones. We saw Henry Parrish before his injury. We've seen flinks of Dominic Thomas, but we haven't seen the guy that we think has the most potential, that has the most superstar, the most elusiveness, the most break tackle potential. And I just don't get it. So do I think Lane is gonna sit there and reevaluate and say, I have to move on? I don't know. Because, I'm gonna make this comparison to Coach Yo, and she completely restocked her coaching staff this year and had to let go of people that have been with her for years. But she wanted to see success in March Madness that she had not seen other than the Sweet 16 run, but she wants to make a national championship run. She did that. I don't know if Lane Kiffin will do that. I really I don't know. I think it's time, and I'm having these thoughts about Austin Simmons. I don't know if there's a better time to do it now, but at the same time, you do take the risk of losing Austin Simmons with the firing of Charlie Weiss Jr. So I don't know, man. Like it's really hard to go about. It really is.
And then, yeah, you look at Kevin Smith, you got Shakai Mills-Knight coming in here. The guy's
Yeah, yeah,
225 pounds. He's playing in a playoff game where he scored, I think, 3 or 4 touchdowns. The dude looks like he's going to come in and, play a similar role as Quinshon Judkins did his freshman year. So, there's so many moving pieces, Daylan. And,
Mhm.
I think an even bigger question is in the world of NIL, at what point do the donors, feel like their money wasn't spent well?
Yeah,
And you look at Florida State, they had an abysmal year. And clearly, they're not going to get the same funding as they did. And then you look at Ole Miss, this is the best funded we've ever been. The Grove Collective and the donors have done an incredible job.
yeah,
And there has to be a point when you're like, we just invested for the best season of Ole Miss football we could have ever expected. That was the expectation that we were going to go to the playoffs and potentially compete for a national championship. And it didn't matter. You're a 3-loss team with losses against Kentucky, a mediocre LSU team in the grand scheme of things, and a 4-4 SEC Florida team with the most invested team that Ole Miss has ever had. To me, there's a problem in the coaching staff. And you might lose a recruit, but in the long run, Daylan, this is something that has to get fixed. I think it is beyond unprofessional that Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin refuse to play Ulysses Bentley at all today.
yep.
0 stats for him, Daylan. A guy
Zero. Say it again. Zero. Zero.
didn't touch the ball. A guy who scored a touchdown against, quote, the best program in college football, as Lane refers to Georgia, and a guy who was very involved in the passing game as well. I mentioned it earlier. Bentley was all over the place. There were a couple, at least one 20-yard game that he had just from catching the ball.
Yep.
And instead you put your punt returner in to play running back.
Yep.
We credit Micah Davis. He's done a great job. He muffed one today, which was crucial, but he hadn't done it all season. So credit to him, but he's not a running back. This is a smaller type guy. He can't run in between the guards. He surely can't run, in between the tackles. The only time he found success today was when he was in space, and that didn't happen a lot. Also, Daylan, John Garrison. Let's get into another offensive.
I'm glad you brought it up.
The offensive line, up until these past 3 weeks, I really don't want to forget this. They were horrible against Kentucky and LSU. They did a solid job in the middle of those games at South Carolina. I know today, Reese McIntyre got hurt. I get it. Pettis was out here and there. But just the inconsistency in the fact that our backup center is struggling to get snaps to Jackson Dart in a game where the season's on the line, and then Dart has no time to throw. The second Reese McIntyre gets out of the game, the Florida defensive line looks like the best line in the country, and they're very talented. Don't get me wrong. But if you compare and look at it, what happened in the first half, Dart had all day to throw. Go look at the touchdown passes, a 43-yard pass to Trey Harris where he's sitting in the pocket. He just launches it. Caden Lee, he has time to go through his progressions, launches a absolute dart down the middle of the field for a touchdown. And then McIntyre goes out and all hell breaks loose. So how do you claim in a press conference, if you're Lane Kiffin, that this is the most healthy the team has been, and this is the most depth that they felt all year? And then the second one player goes out, which I understand it's a big part of the team. McIntyre's been snapping the ball at center all year. But the second he's out, everything falls apart, man. And maybe there's a problem that Ole Miss is getting injured too much too. There's a lot to discuss here, but I first and foremost, I want to get your thoughts on that situation.
I think that's a great point to bring up. There are two games well, the first game I want to bring up is the Georgia game. People, you can go back and watch that game, and I thought I mean, even today we did really good cleaning up the penalties. But watch a lot of the snaps to our quarterbacks, Austin Simmons and Jackson Dart throughout that game. There were a lot of high snaps in that game that really scared the crap out of me, if I'm being honest. And I was surprised that none of them turned out to be a fumble. And I simply just sit there and rely on. Maybe, that was the part of the weather throughout the Georgia game, but how much is that coaching? And I go back to this game, there was a drive that JJ that went outside and he got stopped by the Florida defense, and I watched Nate Kalepo take a huge jump to his left side when there was a defensive lineman right there coming right down the middle to his right, and he literally just goes to the left and doesn't block anyone instead of stepping to the right. I watched us do that against LSU too. I watched our offensive line double a few of LSU defensive linemen for no reason at all, and leave a guy on the outside to have an ability to come right down the middle and stop our plays. But think about it as this too, man. Think about the LSU game. The play that pissed both of us off so much is we run the ball 4 times after
Yeah.
getting an interception and on the ball on our own 13. What happens when we run the ball on 4th and 1? We quick hike it instead of bringing JJ Pegues in. Think about the time that we brought if I'm not mistaken, we either brought JJ in. No, okay. Let me get my facts straight. I'm sorry, y'all. We quick hike it on that run, and Jordan Watkins is on the outside, and he's trying to block a linebacker, and the linebacker just right by him, and he stops Henry Parrish from getting it converted on the 4th down. We put ourselves in so many unfathomable situations, and I don't get it. The same thing that happens today. Why is Nate Kalepo stepping over to the left when I can see the defensive tackle coming right down the middle? It's frustrating, and the penalties got cleaned up, which is huge, but that's something that even the defense kind of struggled with. Jana Kennedy getting a face mask, unnecessary
Oh my
face mask that
gosh.
that ends the drive, hopefully, and we don't get off the field. Before I get too off track, you brought up a great point, the red zone. Let me tell you something, Zach. 4 red zone drives today, 3 total points. Let me say that again. 4 red zone drives, 3 total points. That's something that I've talked about the entire season, going into so many games, not just our 2 losses, but going into so many games with you, with Stephen Willis on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We have to win the red zone. Great teams win in the red zone. We haven't won in the red zone so many times in this season, and for some games we ended up winning those games. Some of those games we did. We didn't win in the red zone today. We didn't. We simply did not. And I think that frustrates me because we got a little creative with our play calls today. One of the fourth and ones, we bring JJ in. I'm like, why are we bringing JJ in? And
Yeah.
then we end up throwing it to Jordan Watkins and we convert, and then we go down and score with a touchdown pass to Caden Lee. Great. We got to get more creative. That is what Lane Kiffin has established to be really good at. And sometimes it may come back as a headbutt and thinking, why did we do that instead of we can just be more simple? But I've seen us be creative a lot this year, and it works out for the better. We're putting ourselves in situations where we're not converting on the points that are given to us, and it hurts us. I don't understand. Kane Davis misses a field goal, but even then, I'm okay with the first 4th and 1 drive, but why is Kane Davis not given the opportunity to go out there and put 3 points in the board? He goes 5 for 5 against Georgia, but you don't give him the ample opportunity to go out there and on the first drive on the second drive to go out there and get points. It's a momentum kill, and as much as he misses that his first field goal attempt, him not being able to go out there on that second drive, maybe it messed with his head a little bit. And then when he got the opportunity to actually go out there on the first time and has a little cold feet, he wasn't ready for the moment. And as much as that you can put it on Caden, that can also be put it on coaching. And why are we going for him when there's no necessarily reason to? We didn't force points against Georgia. We win the game 28-10 if Caden Davis has 15 points. We forced the
Yeah.
opportunities against Florida. We're sitting here with a loss, and now our playoff chances are out the window. That's so frustrating, and the offensive line has accumulated it to that. Um, and I don't want to put too much overly blame on them because they have been beaten up this year, like you said. But looking at it, you do just kind of question things so much in that area, and you just kind of have to doubt how good were some of the transfer portal guys really looked at before they were just brought in, and how they could fit our system. And that's a frustrating part. One thing that I really want to bring up to you as well that I kind of want you to just kind of mesh on. I really feel for the defense. I do. Like they have literally played their minds out all season long, and you just said it a minute ago how great they have been today. And even after a lackluster first half against Florida today, they come out in the third half, and if I'm not mistaken, they gave up 6 total yards in the third quarter. So for them to have that much heart, that much emotion, and that was at a time as well where Chris Paul Jr. got hurt in the first half. Yeah, Banks got hurt. Jay Kennedy dealt with an injury as well. I watched Walter Nolan get beat up a lot, and Jared Ivey. They came out there in the second half and immediately continued to attack. And the LSU game, they attacked the entire game. A few questionable things, we rushed three that late fourth down drive in the fourth quarter, and that was questionable. And then we ended up losing the game. You could say because of the defense, but because Jared Nussmeier throws a touchdown, we only gave up 20 points to a Kentucky team, and our offense only gives up 17 and only puts up 17 points to a Kentucky team. That loss really, really, really looks bad now, with considering that we are their only conference win at this point in the season. But the defense, I just feel really bad for them. Like they continue to play their hearts out the entire season, um, just play out their minds. Pete Golding has established something that I don't know we will ever be able to see again here at Ole Miss, and it's frustrating just for me because I've always been a defensive guy myself, and it's frustrating to see them play the way they have this entire season, and they have 3 losses to their name. And people that don't watch the games will think, oh, this is going to be the defense's fault. People that go back and watch that LSU game, oh, J.D. Kennedy gave up a touchdown to Kyron Lacy, and that's the
Yeah.
reason. That's the reason Ole Miss lost the game. It's not. And if you sit back and you have the eye test and you watch the games like we do, the defense has been one of, if not the best defenses in the country. And that's the frustrating part for me as well, that the offense is Lane Kiffin offense, is Charlie Wise offense that is supposed to be high potent, and they've done so well over the past couple of years, in which we believe they would, especially bringing back the talent that they did. And they're the question mark of the season.
Yeah, and also, Lane, I've mentioned it previously, on the live, but he mentions that the team is at its healthiest and they're feeling
Yeah.
good. Did Jaden Williams take a snap today?
Don't think you did, my friend. Don't think
So,
you did.
and then that's confusing to me. Williams, I know he hasn't played in a while, but this is a guy who was questionable to come back week after week after week, similar to Trey Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, when the offensive line is getting eaten up in the second half, maybe it's time to think, well, we should try something different. I'm not a coach, right? We're two guys, students at Ole Miss, talking about this
Mm-hmm.
football game. But that's just my perspective. And when Williams did play earlier in the season, he was probably your best all-around blocker. So it sucks, and hopefully he's a guy you can get back next year. But you would have liked to see him in this game. Logan Diggs, I thought, from what it sounded like, I texted our boss, shout out Miss Evie last night. I thought he was going to play.
Yeah, we
And
all did.
right. Again, it's just confusing because I know Lane likes to play games with the injury, the injury report and all these different comments that he says, but he made it sound as if Logan Diggs was playing. So we were fully expecting that. And he didn't. And that's fine, right? That's okay. ACL, whatever. I would have liked to see him out there. But why is Micah Davis starting at running back? Dude, this is something that I'm just never going to understand. And I think the most frustrating part about the whole thing is that you had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. And
Yeah.
you saw exactly what Florida did last week against LSU at home. You had a carbon copy of what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
For example, LSU, 3 for 4 in the red zone, I believe, with 3 field goals, maybe. So, okay. One of our keys to the game, if you guys watch our podcast, make sure to like and subscribe. We posted about it last week, was to score in the red zone. And Daylan mentioned it earlier, but we didn't do that. Ole Miss basically did everything they needed to lose this game. I tweeted that out. you can't do all these things in the red zone. You can't fail so many fourth down conversions on the road and expect to win. You can't muff a punt. You can't drop a wide open touchdown in the end zone because the sun's in your eyes. Right? I played baseball in high school. I get it. The sun sucks. But as a Division I athlete, you gotta haul it in, Daylan. One of the turning points of the game, I thought, was Ole Miss, John Saunders. Right, he gets another interception. That's all this guy does is create problems for opposing offenses.
Shout
John
out number 5.
Daylan talks about this guy all the time. Ole Miss goes down, and I believe it was the play to Caden Lee where Jackson Dart throws a missile and Caden Lee catches it in the end zone. I thought that was a time when the defense, was going to essentially seal the game. And you got to give credit to Florida. They went down here. I'm looking at the game log, looking like a 2-minute drive. They marched down the field and, really tied up the game. And then you go down and Caden Davis misses the field goal. And then it's a game. And it's 14-14. You're at halftime. And now I'm starting to get concerned because on the road, Ole Miss hasn't played well in close games. And I'm referring to that LSU game. And unfortunately, it kind of continued in the second half. We talked about Reese McIntyre. He went out, and when that happened, it seemed like the entire offense fell apart. Not only were they not using Bentley, but I didn't think Jackson Dart was really targeting Daquan Wright or Caden Priestcorn, similar to how he did in weeks prior. And to me, that's what really, propelled this offense to be so successful. Was spreading out the ball. And I thought it got a little one-dimensional trying to hit Jordan Watkins and Caden Lee every play. Again, this is literally what happened against LSU when Trey Harris left the game. If you guys remember Caden Lee, who's an awesome player, all respect to Caden, but he got all the targets and the offense looked a little one-dimensional. That's exactly what happened in this half. Ole Miss scored 3 points in the second half. The defense did everything they could. I said it before. They got the offense the ball 2 times under 5 minutes, and Jackson Dart throws 2 really just terrible interceptions, actually almost 3 basically, and it sucks. And it's to the point, Daylan, where I don't even know how to feel because it's a similar feeling to walking out of Vaught Hemingway after that Kentucky game. I'm just like, what? I can't even process how they lost this game. This is the season where you put a former head coach in Zach Arnett on your staff. You put a guy who worked with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and Joe Judge on your staff. You returned all these different starting players. It's just heartbreaking. And for the fans who invested so much into the season, and it sounds terrible, but really, not for a whole lot to come with it. You're going to go to a bowl game, but the expectation was playoffs, and you saw the ranking on Tuesday night. You're sliding at the number 9 spot with everything ahead of you. You have the potential to host a playoff game. Now you're sitting here, we're talking here on Saturday night, and Ole Miss is going to be playing in a bowl game with, I don't know what players, because every player's on the team essentially a senior at this point, and it's just disappointing, Daylan. We mentioned it. There's a lot of coaching changes that we think might need to be made, but it's directly going to affect the recruiting trail. So we're going to have to see what happens there, specifically referring to Charlie Weiss Jr. But at the same time, we've been talking sad for this entire podcast. I do want to recognize that, you have a really special player in Austin Simmons. And I know the fans don't want to hear it right now, but this is a kid who can essentially turn the program into what it was this year, potentially next year. But really, I think his second year of play. And it's exciting. I think Jackson Dart and Ivy and Princely and Nolan and, all these Trey Harris, all these incredible players shine a light that you can come here and win the big game at Ole Miss. And they did that against Georgia. They couldn't capitalize, though. And, now we're sitting here. There's no playoffs, but I do think there are some things to look forward to in the future, despite, this terrible finish to the year. Simmons is going to allow you to do that. He's going to allow you to go and get really good players. Like, you saw on the recruiting show with Caleb Cunningham, flipping the offensive lineman from LSU to Ole Miss. So there is hope, right? Kiffin, as bad of a game as I thought he called, he's done a nice job in terms of building the brand of Ole Miss. And I think that's only going to continue. So I just want to get your thoughts, Daylan, on, what's next for this team, despite how hard it is talking about, in the moment that we essentially just threw the entire season away in Gainesville.
You know, I'm thinking back to after the Georgia win, and myself included. I said this, and Lane Kiffin said this a lot. I wonder just, and shout out to my man Josh Guest in the comments as well, kind of talking about this as well. But I kind of just wonder how much did we actually put into just beating Georgia instead
Yes.
of playing a full course season? You know, I go back to the first 4 non-conference games of the schedule and how much that really affected us losing to Kentucky and how much of a light fall camp before the season started we had and how much of a non-traditional spring practice we had this past spring, how much that played into effect of how unready we were for Kentucky at the time. And something I wanna bring up as well, and I don't wanna hold you guys too long. I know we're just kinda getting an instant reaction, and we appreciate you guys for being with us. But a few things that I wanna tingle on is, first, think about so many of the times that we drop passes today. And even the LSU game, and again, I love Trey Harris, don't get me wrong. He drops that pass, that deep pass on the first drive. I mean, we can play the what if game all day, but that
Yeah.
may that may win us the game. Juice WRLD catches that touchdown. That may wins us the game, depending on how momentum goes from that point on. I thought Dart did a really good job with his accuracy today. I thought he did have a few kind of just little overthrows or put too much power on some of his throws, and even one of the Jordan Watkins drops it. I thought he could have maybe pulled him, and I thought Jay did overthrow it, but some of our wide receivers, even today, I thought, Jordan dropped a easy pass that he should not have dropped at another point in the game. Really just it frustrated me. And this is a point that I'm just kind of throwing out there just to kind of tingle people a little bit. But I wonder how much Derek Nix leaving, going to Auburn, and he was, for people that don't know who Derek Nix was, Derek Nix had been at Ole Miss since 2009. If I'm not mistaken, he was associate head coach. He was the wide receivers coach, and is now at Auburn and is the offensive coordinator under Hugh Freeze. I wonder just how much him leaving really has changed what this wide receiver group does, and I think that may be a big key as well. I just I just don't know, man. I don't know where to go because I'm really excited for the future, but in the back of my mind, I'm scared that losing this game, maybe a few of those recruits will now be like, I don't want to be here now. And I know that is just me kind of being landerish a little bit, but as well, you have to think of the landscape of recruiting, how just bouncy it really is.
Yeah.
The commitments, it's so hard getting guys to commit, but it's even harder keeping them to commit. So I mean, it looks good for us now, but players want to go somewhere that they can win. And after the Georgia win, I think guys saw a guy like Lane Kiffin that does a really good job at getting NIL. He does a really good job at promoting his team on social media, and a guy that has shown at that time can win a big game. Now, winning that big game doesn't matter.
No.
This was supposed to be the year that Ole Miss finally gets some type of hardware. Ole Miss and Lincoln finally get over the hump? And now we're sitting here with the game left, I mean, against before Mississippi State, and we're not being able to do that. So I hate to be that Debbie Downer one more time, but it's frustrating. Regardless of the situation of how things move forward, I think it's time to fully just focus on Austin Simmons. I don't know whether or not that decision will be made, whether he goes out there and gets the start against Mississippi State to see just
Yeah.
how he can kind of flow for a full game against the SEC team. I'm sure that's going to be a conversation to be had. But at the same time, I wouldn't kind of dismantle it for Jackson Dart to come out there and have one final home game, and just ride out the sunset. But I just don't know. I don't know how fans are going to take that. I don't know how Dart is going to be able to take that himself. I think that unfortunately this is now going to put him in a bind that it's going to be really hard to get out of. And this is supposed to be the year when the last dance was the name of this season, and now that we're not reaching that potential, it really just I feel like it's gonna put him in a mental bind. And I want to say to Jackson, I know this probably won't get to him, or he probably won't watch this, but I'm still rooting for you, kid. You're a human being, and I've watched you grow so much since you've been here. And I want people to criticize, myself included, but to a respectable level. There's no need for death threats. There's no need for threats in
No,
general. At the end of the day, this is college football. This is a sport, and you shouldn't be doing all that. I understand this is a time now where we definitely have the right to criticize now that NIL is a full blown in effect, but to a respectable level, people. But man, I'm excited to hopefully have Austin Simmons here for the coming future, and hopefully that whatever happens within the staff, Austin gets the totality of people that he wants here that will allow him to move forward and be successful. And I hope that he just has all the preparation needed to be a superstar here at Ole Miss.
absolutely, Dalen. And shout out Davis Beeler in the chat. It's my good buddy. It says fire Charlie Weiss. Davis, we talked about it earlier. The question becomes what happens with Austin Simmons, and how big of a role does Charlie Weiss play in Austin staying here, which I think Austin would. There's also a good relationship between Lane and Charlie Weiss who go back a while. So I'm not sure that's a step Lane's willing to take, but it's definitely one that the fans clearly want. We're looking at another comment here. 2003 LSU loss, 4th and 25, Treadwell's ankle. Now this, tough times for Rebel fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I was not an Ole Miss fan growing up. I'm a
Hmm.
sophomore here at Ole Miss, and it's really painful already. So, I give my condolences to, the lifelong Rebel fans who are tuning in, who've really, been through the grind. And you get to this year and there's all this excitement and you put all your money and all your faith into the season. And then it turns out like this. It's not fun for me. So I really can't imagine how it is, for the rest of the fan base. And I do apologize for that. Donna, shout out Donna here in the chat. Who do we
Hmm.
get out of the portal for offensive line and running back? That's a great question. I think you're going to get a good look at this the second the portal opens. You have to consider the fact that we are now eliminated from the college football playoffs, and Lane Kiffin needs to use this as motivation and fuel to ultimately go berserk in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Because you can't have another situation at running back when your punt returner is starting a game where your college football playoff destiny lies on the line.
Hmm.
That can't happen again. It doesn't matter who's injured. I don't care if every single running back on the roster is injured. There has to be a better option than that, and you have to recruit someone better for that. Offensive line, great question, Donna. Just about all of them are going to be leaving due to eligibility, the NFL draft, whatever the case may be. So you have to go get more. I'll tell you right now, Bryson Sanders is probably going to be the starting center next year. He's a very, very talented player. I believe he will be a redshirt sophomore next year. Jaden Williams may come back, I believe. Not real sure the status of Micah Pettis. There's a couple question marks there, but for the majority of the names that you guys are familiar with, whether it be Eli Acker, Jeremy James, Caleb Warren, Jerquan Scott, McIntyre, all those guys, they're out of eligibility. They're gone. And I guess the question for me, Dalen, is how can you recruit to the same level that you did last year without this pitch of the last dance? Because I think a big part of the reason how you got so many big recruits out of the portal last year was Lane Kiffin said it. Jackson Dart's calling these guys, going and visiting their homes and talking to them one-on-one to sell them on this pitch that, yeah, we're going all in. We can pay you this amount
Yep.
and we're going to win a national championship or bust. So now you're at the point of a bust. There is no more selling point of going all in for next year because you're losing basically everyone. Now, don't get me wrong. The ability to restack your roster can be done, and it can be done easily. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to be. But there's not the vibe of coming off of a Peach Bowl win, ready to go,
Hmm.
compete for a national championship.
1000%.
Um, so we're gonna have to keep our eyes peeled for that. It's definitely something to watch out for. And again, this is an opportunity for Lane and the coaching staff to go show that even though this isn't the last dance for next year, we're still able to recruit at a high level. And they've showed us that. I think Pete Golding has done an incredible job, especially in high school. But you're gonna have to go revamp the entire roster. Look, Kurt Cignetti did it at Indiana, and they definitely don't have nearly the amount of NIL or structure in their program in term comparing to Ole Miss football. So don't get me wrong. Ole Miss is going to be a top 25 team next year. I'm just curious to see where they're going to go, man. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and we're going to have to see what happens with the NIL donors because I'm sure there's some tuning in right now, and it's probably not a really good feeling to put a lot of money and effort and heart and love into this team and not get the result. And that's something that's not talked about. What happens when all these donors combine to put in all this money and they don't get the result they want? Probably not good things. Hopefully that's not the case at Ole Miss. I feel like we have a really loyal fan base just from being in Oxford for the past couple of years. There's a lot of love and support around the program, and I firmly believe that we're going to be back, and Lane Kiffin is going to stay. Unfortunately, I think he may keep some of the guys on the coaching staff with him that we may not want, but the point being is that Lane is probably going to be here. Knox Kiffin's supposedly moving here next year. So you have that going for you. You have the Come to the Sip brand, the new uniforms. I know that's controversial, but there are a lot of things flowing in the right direction in terms of the program. But this was a blow to, the fans, me, Daylan, everyone tuning in here. Just an awful, awful day. And it truly, it was the feeling of me walking out of Vaught Hemingway Stadium against Kentucky, man. Just, where do we go from here? And unfortunately, you're not going to get to the playoffs because there's really no more games to be played. Donna just said in the chat, we can't lose the Egg Bowl. Yeah. If we were to lose the Egg Bowl, I don't even want to dissect that, Dylan. That would probably be a 2-hour post-game live show with us, just going crazy on the team. But, on the topic of that, I'm not really sure who wants to play in this Egg Bowl. And it's not a loyalty thing at all. But you got to look at the roster. There are a number of players who are trying to, get drafted here and go to the NFL Combine and put themselves in the right direction to get into that third, second, or first round. So do you risk an injury in a meaningless game against Mississippi State? Probably not, but that's not my decision. I don't know how this team is going to respond. I would not be surprised if we saw Jackson Dart out there, at least for a little bit, because I think he's a guy who takes a lot of pride. I think all these guys do take pride, but, I honestly can't blame them if they choose to, not participate in this one to their full capability to try and save their potential draft stock, which it doesn't sound great. I understand that, but, you got to think about it in terms of how the players are feeling right now. Look, guys, this is not a live that I wanted to be doing, but, we're here and there's really no more games to be played. I'm flying back to Oxford for the Egg Bowl. Was hoping to potentially secure maybe a home playoff game with that win. But that's not the case, Daylan. And it sucks. It's horrible. But look, the program is trending upward. I think it needs to be said that you need to treat every game like the Georgia game next year. You're definitely going to be tested a little more in the non-con. You got Washington State and Tulane, who are two super competitive teams. And hopefully that prepares them more for SEC play. For those who don't know, the SEC schedule is quite literally exactly what Ole Miss played this year, just flipped in terms of home and road opponents. So a lot of good games, potential revenge game with Florida coming to Oxford, with LSU coming to Oxford. But you can't prepare for one team and, quote, scheme against them in the offseason, like Lane Kiffin said the team did against Georgia, and then tone out the second you beat them. Yeah, you got over one hill, but you have 2 more games to be played. And the focus wasn't there. You could tell this team quite literally had a bye week. They had 2 weeks to prepare, and they watched Florida put a pretty good ass beating on LSU last week. And it just, I don't know. It didn't translate, Daylan. The team looked flat from the second they got out there. And you could tell, we were a little starstruck. The crowd got into it early in the swamp. And yeah, just disappointing, man. You have to treat every game like it's Georgia next year. And you got to learn from this. You can't just scheme against one team and treat it like your Super Bowl. It costs you to Kentucky. And unfortunately, I feel like it costs you today. CJ Smith already booked my hotel for the Pop-Tart Bowl. Yeah, man, not a good feeling across the fan base. I understand it, but big things ahead. You hope Austin Simmons can do really good things and recruit some, highly touted offensive players. And at this point, you have to put your trust in Pete Golding to go in the transfer portal, make some really good noise. So that's kind of where I'm at. I really am having a hard time digesting this one, Daylan. I mean, this is a 6-5 Florida team with a freshman quarterback who, by the way, is playing at probably about 80%.
Yep.
And yeah, they did enough to win. So really difficult, man. I don't have much more to say, Dylan. If you have anything else to add, please do. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you do have comments or questions, absolutely let us know. Yeah, tough one, tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I don't have much. Again, like I appreciate you guys for being here and leaving your comments and chatting with us today. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. I don't really just I hate to be up and be in give up mode because I watched this team after the LSU loss. I thought that we weren't going to give up and we continued to fight. And now it's like you're what you said. I don't know what we have to fight for anymore in terms of this season. And it's just kind of frustrating because I wanted to go into this Florida game and just completely dominate. I wanted us to go out there and dominate like we did at Carolina, and not give the committee anything to really doubt in terms of can they put this team in or should they put this team into the playoffs. And not only did we come down to the situation where we could have won the game, but it would have been a very head scratcher of a win, but we ended up losing. And so it's frustrating. There's going to be a lot to depict, like you said, in terms of recruiting. I think that Jackson did a great job this offseason and coming off a historic 11-win season for this program. And that showcased not only that we could do it on the field, but we were having a lot of that talent come back, and it was so easy for him to recruit. Now I don't know how.
Right.
I don't know how you continue to move at a high recruiting level. I think that we've done a good job so far because, and this is just me being honest. I know we're Ole Miss. We're not going to compete with most of the other blue blood schools in terms of recruiting. So that's why, in terms of high school recruiting, so that's why we use the transfer portal a little bit harder than other schools. So we're gonna see, man. It's just gonna take a lot of togetherness from the coaching staff, and I just unfortunately I think that's something Lane has to work on himself. I think that he's a great coach, and I think that he's come into this program and he's elevated the status and the expectation for this program. But I think Lane also at times struggles at keeping a level head and continuing to keep guys together and moving them forward. So this is a time now you're gonna see how good he's at that. And someone in the comments just said, "Ole Miss road SEC games 2-2." That's a great point as well. I don't have too much. I appreciate you guys for being here. I don't want to hold you too long, but howdy toddy y'all. As much as I can say that with love right now.
Yeah. The comment about Jaheim Otis, I think Ole Miss will land him. From what I've heard, really good things. The guy who played for Pete Golding at Alabama. And you have JJ Pegues, Prince Umamian, Jared Ivey, Walter Nolan. All those guys are out of here. So you're going to have to land a guy like Jaheim Otis if you want to establish a really good defensive front. But that's something I do expect to be pretty solid next year. If you return Jamarius Brown, Suntarian Perkins, there's a lot of potential. But just, yeah, that would be a huge pickup for Ole Miss. Just something that's hard to even talk about right now. Last thing here, Daylan. Yeah, man. The comment here about the road games is something that Lane has struggled with, the second he's arrived at Ole Miss. And if you look at the last 2 years, Ole Miss, I thought could have beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa last year. But, we rolled up in Tuscaloosa and the offense looked how it looks in every single loss under Lane Kiffin, really stagnant and wasn't able to move the ball down the field. And then a few weeks later, look, I understand Georgia was miles ahead of us at the time, but we were ranked a top 10 team in Athens last year and got absolutely blown out. And then this year, LSU, Florida. I understand. It's the SEC. It's a hard environment. It's very
Yep.
competitive. There's all these different things. But at some point, you have to take that next step in a coach with your team and win the big one on the road. And Lane Kiffin won the big one at home. He got over the Georgia hump. He did it by he told us scheming against them the entire offseason. And I think the next step you need to do is learning how to beat teams by not scheming against them the entire offseason and taking it one game at a time, like they quote unquote say they're doing every single game.
Yeah.
Um, and take it to them, man. I just, we're going to wrap up here soon, but this is a tough one, man. And you have 2 weeks to prepare. Your season is on the line, and you go out and score 3 points in the second half. You let Florida run the ball all over you all game. You let a freshman quarterback who's not playing 100% make some ridiculous throws, which credit to him and credit to Florida, by the way. They played a great game. But this is one that Ole Miss absolutely had to win. They didn't do it, Daylan. And we're sitting here. The season's essentially over. You got Mississippi State on Friday. The game is meaningless. There's really nothing to play for, aside from, maybe Mississippi State or Ole Miss trying to get some pride here. But the expectation is that Ole Miss was going to make the playoffs this year, and they didn't. And quite honestly, I couldn't care less about Mississippi State right now because the ultimate end goal of the season was not achieved. And here we are recording a live stream with not good things to say. So there's going to be coaching changes. I do believe that. We're going to make some noise in the portal like always, but you got to build on this, Daylan, and you have to take the next step because, you can win the Peach Bowl and have a 10-win season, but, when you put everything into this season and you lose to Kentucky and Florida, like it can't happen, man. And if you want to take the next step into being an elite program, those are some things you have to overcome. I just said it a couple minutes ago, but for anyone else who's newly tuning in, Ole Miss plays Tulane and Washington State, two pretty respectable teams in the non-conference next year, which hopefully prepares them a little bit better for an SEC schedule, which is the exact same, just flipped with home and road opponents. I apologize to the lifelong Ole Miss fans for today, all the donors, everyone who was fully invested in this. It's horrible. We're going to continue to shoot content your guys' way throughout the week. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Daylan, anything else, man?
No, I'm good, man. Enjoy Thanksgiving, everyone. We will
Yeah,
continue to hopefully see you guys throughout the week. Don't let this. It's gonna be sour. It's gonna sting, but don't let this ruin your weekend and your week. Enjoy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your family time, folks.
absolutely, man. Happy holidays to everyone who's celebrating. And again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. As always, hotty toddy. Thanks, guys.
Alrighty,